Now on to we begin a brand new crafts magazine presented by Sue Robinson. Handmade.
Featured in this first edition of Handmade, the stunning work of potter Angus Suttie. We go down to the woods, where we find plenty of surprises. And in our studio workshop, projects in knitting and canvas embroidery get underway. Hello. As you can see from the wobble on my pot, I'm not a professional potter. Pottery is just one of several crafts that I dabble in. My job here is to be your guide on Handmade's excursions into the fascinating world of craft. Each week, we'll be bringing you the very latest in British craft design, with top craftspeople working in a wide variety of styles and materials. Our guest designer this week is Angus Suttie, who's probably best known for his free and exotic forms of familiar objects like the humble teapot. Well, Angus, some people might say these are not so much pots as potty.
Potty? Well, yeah, I suppose lots of people, they would look a bit strange or a bit different. But the thing is, I've looked at lots of other objects in museums and so on which are strange or even stranger. For example, these three pots here, which have been borrowed from the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. This little one here in the front, the teapot, this was made about 1900. And to me, it looks as if it might have been made last year because it has this balance, very modern balance between something which is functional and something which is there for decoration, for pleasure. And then there's the other teapot here, which has these different elements. There's a man holding the long animal's neck, which is the spout, and then there's a figure here, which is the handle. And all these elements are completely out of scale.
Well, now I understand. Your pots really don't look quite so strange. So, what are you going to make for us, Angus?
Well, I thought I'd try and make a teapot, and limiting myself to these two shapes here, a horseshoe shape and this angular shape.
Great.
So the first thing I need to do is roll out a slab of clay. I'll just do that. The thinness is quite important because if it's too thick, you know, it'll be very heavy, so it'll feel too heavy for the size of the pot. I think something like that's quite good. So what I'll do now is just cut out two of these horseshoe shapes. Just very slowly going around the edge. There's one. Now I just need to make a strip for the side of it. So what I need to do now is join these two pieces together. I just need to cross hatch all the way around the bits that are going to be joined. I need to do this to both edges. It's important just to spend time making sure this is done well. And then once I've done the cross hatching, I just take this slurry, and what this is the same clay, red earthenware clay, which I'm using, and it's in a liquid form. And this just acts like a glue. And then press it down.
Must take ages to make a teapot.
Well, I spend about maybe a day, 2 days just making the basic shapes before I start joining them. So it's a bit dull, it's a bit boring, this part. So I've got this half horseshoe shape now, and I want to join this onto the main segment. I mean, there's actually 3 places I could put it, but I think I've decided I'm going to have it here. So just draw a line there, and now I need to do cross hatching all the way around where the 2 pieces are going to join. And because this is going to be actually forming a part of the body of the pot, I'll need to cut out the piece in the middle so that the tea will be able to flow through. And some slurry on both parts again. There we are. Press together, and again we need a little coil to make sure it's really well fixed. And now what I've got left over from the horseshoe is this rectangle. What I've done is I've joined on a flat shape to make it a closed form, and really I feel it's a very boring shape. So I want to cut it at an angle, a diagonal, in order just to make it more interesting. There we are. And figure out just where I'm going to stick these on. But
when you start a pot then, do you have any preconceived ideas of what it's going to look like?
No. I mean, I basically start maybe knowing what the object is I'm going to make. But I don't start with any drawings, any idea of what the finished thing is going to look like. Instead, I sort of, well, improvise it. So I've added 2 half cones to each side, and I just think it makes a more interesting shape. So what I've got to do now is decide which way up it's going to stand. And I've got a choice of 5 ways it could stand. It could stand this way. It could stand that way. It could stand like that. It could stand this way, or that. So.
Choice is yours.
But I think actually I've decided that I like it this way best. So this is how it's going to stand, and now I've got to add the lid, the spout, and the handle.
Great.
Okay? So I think for the lid, put it somewhere here. I've got this oval shape made. So I just need to cross hatch
and slurry.
and slurry where it's going to go.
Well, this is really where it stops being a piece of sculpture and really starts to turn into a teapot.
This is deciding it's going to be a pot, it's going to be a container, it's going to have an inside and an outside, and you're going to give it a function, or at least refer to function anyway.
Would you ever think of working just in sculpture rather than making teapots? Or
Making pots. At the moment, no. I mean, at the moment, I'm too interested in pots and their function and the tradition of pots as well. I mean, I could see a time when I might just make sculpture, but at the moment, I don't want to do that.
where do your ideas come from?
Well, I mean, lately, I mean, about the last 2.5 years, I've been looking at lots of South American pots. So I've been very influenced by South American things. These pots are all at least 1,000 years old, and they were all made without a wheel. I really like this pot because it was made in 2 distinct parts, joined together, and that's exactly the sort of thing that I'm doing in my own work. I'm not sure what the animal is in this pot, but I like to think it's a dog. And what I really enjoy is the decoration on the handle here. This sort of handle is called a stirrup handle. And I love the little detail of the bird. And here is another bird. This time it's catching a fish. And it is absolutely typical of South American pots that, as well as great events such as sex and birth and death, they also put everyday things like a bird catching a fish, preparing a meal, or a woman washing her hair. It all went on their pots. Okay, so that's the spout just finished. All it needs now is the lid. Got the lid here. Put that on, then there's the pot.
Oh, great. So what else have we got to do to it?
Well, what I'll do now is just paint it with white slip, then I'll let it dry out for a few days. Once it's bone dry, I'll do the first firing, and then I'll paint on glaze, refire it, and there we are, we'll have the finished teapot.
Well, can we see it next week? Will you bring it in?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Along the eastern shores of Coniston Water in Cumbria lies Grisdale Forest, 9,000 acres of deciduous woodland and dense plantations of conifer. The forest has many legends. People say it had its origins in the Stone Age. Down the centuries, many have fought, hunted and sheltered here. Warriors, miners, shepherds, monks and foresters, and their ghosts remain. Today, only the intrepid dare to venture in. Sculptors and craftsmen like Jim Partridge have produced a huge variety of work for Grizedale Forest Park. Jim was asked to build a bridge over a small stream.
Well, I was asked to design a bridge for the particular site, and it has to raise slightly over its length because it's for wheelchair access, and they can't afford to have any steep rises. I particularly wanted to use this material, which I guess is normally regarded as waste wood. It's oak that's been, as I said, felled for about 20 years, and what's happened is the sapwood, the outside half an inch or inch of underneath, the bark's completely disappeared off this bit, but the bit underneath is the sapwood, which isn't durable at all. So within about 10 years, it gets to this state, and you can do woodwork with your bare hands, really. But what's left is the heartwood, which is very, very dense, solid, and as one expects oak to be, really. It hasn't seasoned yet, but it won't rot now. I'm using very basic techniques, just hammer and nails, and the chainsaw for shaping things afterwards. The construction is very similar to a traditional stone bridge, so the arch has been made very rigid, and all the pieces are nailed one to the next in 2 or 3 different directions, so it's a completely solid arch.
As well as working in the forest, Jim has explored the forest sculpture for himself.
One of the nice things about the boars is that they aren't very obvious until you're right on top of them. And then when you are on top of them, it's too late to get away, and they're completely surrounding you as a group. Well, there's one wallowing and one scratching itself, but 2 or 3 of them are also looking very aggressive and very dynamic. Sidewind is another name for rattlesnakes. It's just made out of curved pine logs, naturally curved logs that have been blown over and carried on growing and grown bent. And there's just hundreds of them, so the main job has been finding the pieces and putting them in the right order. He hasn't actually been shaping them at all. And I think the things that work best as sculpture actually might not be the best sculpture necessarily, but just look as if they belong in those spaces.
Sculptor David Kemp first came to work at Grizedale in 1981. Since then, he's made sculptures for many different sites.
Well, working in the forest, you're usually working by yourself, and whatever technology you have in your workshop, you can't really bring with you. There's no way of putting a plug in. And in my case, I use timber that's already the right sort of shape because it gives me a great head start. And also it seems to belong to the forest. And I think the most successful forest sculptures are ones that do belong. They don't intrude. Well, the deer hunter stands as still as a tree, and a deer hunter knows the habits of his prey intimately, so he has a head like a deer and stands silently as a tree waiting. I think you can get quite close to the deer hunter and not see him there now, because that's the essence of being able to hunt, is to stand and wait and watch, be quiet and wait for things to happen in front of you.
David's latest commission, designed to represent the forest at the Glasgow Garden Festival, is a big contrast to his previous work and is called the Ancient Forester.
He's a benign creature, the ancient forester. He's the guardian, obviously, of the forest. Maybe some birds perching on his shoulder. The ancient forester, of course, is made from the bones of the forest, and his components are the components of the forest. The most obvious find, and the first find, which is a trunk. Being a lazy person, rather than having to carve 2 legs, I found a tree with the trunks that split. And you see the roots at the top are now turned up, and the roots become the dorsal muscles. We've got some larch poles here for the arm, left and right arm, crossed over to hold the axe, which is over here. We've got the haft of the axe. And we're getting ahead with the feet. We've got one started here with some toes. We've got to find a way of joining them together. And the base of the other foot, which we've just cut off. And possibly some fingers, but we've got to find all the other pieces yet. The forest is more than just the wilderness, it's man's use of it, and the ancient forester will hopefully symbolise some of that. The forest has a mood, it has moods, and if one is able to, one can combine them in the pieces one makes, so that the forest is a component of the pieces, that you're making things in the forest that are about the forest. I mean, when people encounter them, there's no footnotes by the footpath that describe what they are. You have to make your own decisions about it. They help you understand the forest and its many aspects. I mean, if I could tell you in words, I wouldn't be a sculptor.
If I tell you that the inspiration for these abstract canvas embroideries come from esoteric mathematical puzzles, you might not be surprised to discover that the craftsman who worked them is in fact a retired engineer, Basil Swindells. Hi, Basil. Now, can you explain this design to me?
This embroidery represents the numbers 1 to 100. The number 1 is a self number, and so it is a full area of colour. Number 2 is also a full area because it has no factors other than itself and 1.
Yes.
And likewise, number 3 is a full area. Number 4 is made up of 2 times 2, so it has 2 areas of the 2 colour.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And moving on, number 6 is 2 times 3, so it has 1 area of 2 and 1 area of 3.
Oh, I see.
And so on. Here, for example, is 96, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. 97 is a prime,
Yes.
and so is a self-colour.
So you bring in another new colour right
Yes.
at the end. It's remarkable. What a lot of working out. Now, what about this one? Explain this one to me.
This represents pentominoes and hexominoes. Pentomino is a word which has been coined from domino. A domino, 2 squares put together. That can only be done in one way. But when one comes to 5 squares, they can be put together in 12 different arrangements. Here, 9 of them are shown within the cross, and to a larger scale, the cross itself is also one of the pentomino shapes.
Oh, I see.
The 9 within the cross have each been given a separate colour. Surrounding them are the 35, all the possible ways that 6 squares can be put together.
Right, Basil, come and show me what you're doing over here.
I've been making out a new design for cushions, working upon this theme. This is a square divided up into 484 rectangles by drawing straight columns and horizontal rows. The spacing varies from 13 holes of the canvas, 12, 11, down to 3. And that gives me a symmetrical diagram. I'm working on variations of this theme, and here I have split the sequence of 13 down to 3 into 2 parts. I've already marked out the canvas so far, and it will be 13, 11, 9, 7, 5, 3, then building up 4, 8, 10, and 12. I now have to put in the vertical columns using a permanent pen.
That's brilliant, without a ruler.
Yes, the pen just fits into the canvas and very nicely runs along.
Oh, I see. Well, it's really difficult, Basil, to imagine what it's going to be like, and I long to see it when you bring it back to show us next time.
It'll be my pleasure.
Anita Smith is a craftswoman who combines her passion for writing with machine knitting to make garments which tell their own story. Now, what have you got for us, Anita?
This is a garment I created from a story and a poem I wrote about 2 weeks ago about a man who lived in paradise and heard of a place called the city. And to get to the city, he had to go through a trap, which is the bodice. And the only way he could actually get through the trap is with the key, which is his soul. And here he had to go down some stairs, and these stairs lead down to the trap. And this sleeve, in his mind, he saw bars because he was trapped, and behind the bars were the coloured lights. So we went down through the trap to the skirt, which is the underworld. And this yellow emphasises gold, and behind the gold is black, the continuation of the trap. These figures here are different countries. This one's Africa, Japan, Russia, and France. Well, the next thing I do is actually get some squared paper and using the shadow only, at over 24 stitches, mark out the design.
Oh, I see. So it's like a silhouette. There's your French man with the berry.
Right. And the bottle, and the wine glass, and the snail upon a plate.
Oh, the snail. Now, you've marked the pattern out onto the squared paper. What happens next?
Well, the next thing I do is to actually mark the design onto the punch card. After the design is marked out, punch out the hose. I'm going to place the punch card into the machine. Now it's finished. Just going to take this off.
And so that's your tension swatch?
Yes.
Okay, and so that gives you the tension for the rest of the panel. Right, well, I can't wait to see the garment when it's finished. Thanks very much, Anita.
Thank you.
It's machine knitting with Kay Boyd. This is one of her outfits. And we'll be going behind the scenes of the famous Notting Hill Carnival to see the work that goes into those fabulous costumes. So until then, bye.
There's a 30-page booklet prepared by the Craft Council to accompany this series. For a free copy, please send a large stamped-addressed envelope with a 32p stamp to Handmade, BBC Education, London W12 7RJ.